Thank you again for coming over and for joining our panel. This afternoon, we'd like to dedicate it to talking about the art of Assassin's Creed and how it has influenced the franchise and brand as a whole. And also this afternoon, we are joined by wonderful guests. But before I introduce them to you, I would like to introduce myself first. I am Stephanie Pecauco. I'm also known as UB Spectre for those who, check out our channels. And I'm one of your community developers for Assassin's Creed. Now, moving to our guests, we have Rafael Lacoste, who is our franchise art director, and Anouk Bachman, who is our international licensing project manager. So why don't you guys talk to them about what you do, tell them about yourself, funny things, interesting things, and let's start with you, Raf.
Yes, thanks for the introduction. So yes, my responsibility now is to take care of the whole franchise for the artistic direction. But before that, I have like a more traditional background. I've been working in a theater company when I was very young, doing lighting, a lot of photography and drawing sketches. But at a point, my father, asked me, to find like a real job. But I loved what I was doing, but it was very hard to make a living, and it was a very human experience. I really loved the human experience, working with the team, learn how to how works the human gesture, how to deal with people with different personalities, divas, and also taking photos of all the actors and the actress was extremely inspiring for the image composition. How to see how to deal with the lighting and the faces, and also how to deal with the scenery with the actors. So that's a very traditional background. So that means that working in the video game industry doesn't mean that you have to be technical and you have to be a programmer. I think it's really about having a passion, and you can express this passion through electronic medias, but also very traditional medias. I'm still doing a lot of photos, so it's like a traditional background, before diving into the computer graphics.
So, can you tell us about how you started in Ubisoft and what are interesting points in your career that led you to where you are right now?
So before going to Ubisoft, I was a student in the fine arts in Bordeaux, in France, and I joined the not very famous company Callisto. Do some people know the company, French company Callisto? Yeah, you know it? Okay. So it was a very nice company. We worked on many products that were never released. Never. They did one, I think it was the Nightmare Creator. But after that, we worked on the Dark Earth and number 2, number 3, and they never come out. But before the big crash of the video game industry in France in 2002, I got contacted by Yanis Mala, who is now the studio manager in Montreal, to work as art director on Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. So that was my leap of faith, my first leap of faith, crossing the ocean, arriving in Montreal. And it's like, what is that city? I was, from this, cute little city of Bordeaux in France, drinking wine all the time. And then wine was very expensive, and I was like, shit. But it's like, I'm still drinking wine. Too much. But, so the first project was Sands of Time. That was a big challenge because it was my first project as an art director. And after we created the franchise of Assassin's Creed with the first AC, which was a kind of the evolution of Sands of Time, but in a very different way, more like grounded, more realistic, also completely open, not linear, not like a platforming game. So that was a huge challenge because we had to deal with the ability to see all the buildings from very close, but also from very far. So we had to deal with the high amounts of details when you want to climb on the buildings to be able to see all the textures from very close, but also from the distance. You want to see a beautiful image composition. We also have to deal with the gameplay, so it has to be fluid, fun. You don't want to have problems with the navigation, for sure, but also you want to have a beautiful picture that is fun to play. So it's also historical. So a challenge to be historical, artistic, fun to play.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you worked on Prince of Persia and the first Assassin's Creed. What other Assassin's Creed have you worked on?
I stepped away from the video game industry in 2008. I went into the film industry. I worked on many movies as a matte painter and illustrator. I worked on Terminator, The Revelation. That was the name? Revelation? Terminator? No, that's... Salvation, yes. Revelation is a video game. It's different. I worked on that one. Journey to the Center of the Earth, a couple of movies like Immortals. And that was a great experience because I worked with very senior artists, very strong art directors and production designers. So I learned a lot from these guys and girls. They had like 20 years, 30 years of experience, so it's a huge, they're very senior. So I learned a lot from them. But at the same time, I didn't have the same freedom I had when I was art directing and working on video games. So eventually I came back to Ubisoft after this step back, and I got the chance to work on Assassin's Creed Revelation, and with the incredible team of artists, with people like Jeffrey Simpson, who will be able to sign the brand artbook cover later on, and Martin Deschambault, who is here hiding somewhere.
Wave, Martin. He's over there.
Yes, he's there. Yeah. Martin did many fantastic paintings of Constantinople. We tried to challenge the navigation to have like a very dense image composition, but also very organic visuals. We didn't want to have like flat walls like we had in Brotherhood, like very clean, very flat. We wanted to play with overhanging structures, to play with very interesting contrast of navigation behind the bay windows. On the rooftops, we had like also these beautiful rooftops with interesting curves. So it was very dense, very organic, and also exotic after the experience of Brotherhood.
Right. And then later on, you're going to talk about Black Flag, but that's a little bit later.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, it's on the screen anyway, just a bit of a preview. But let's also move on to Anouk, who is a really big influence in everything that every other things that you see in the franchise, like the art books, the novels, the comic books. So please feel free to tell us like what you do and how you work in order to create all these amazing output.
This works well. Yeah. Okay. Good. First of all, I want to say it's awesome to see you all here, and especially cosplayers. I think it was just pointed out we saw some multiplayer cosplayers.
Yeah, I think you guys should wave so that people can see where you are. There they are. They're an amazing group there.
Because it's something that in the brand, and not just me and Raphael, but like a lot of people in production, it motivates us immensely when we're going through years and years of making games, which is really not an easy job to see our fans, like whether it's cosplayers or people creating artwork, it's really inspiring for us that you guys are doing that. So thank you. And thank you for being here. For me, my history is very different from Raphael. I'm not an artist. I always wanted to be an artist, but my parents refused to let me go to the art academy. So that was cut off very early. However, I always loved art, and I think I've been very lucky in life to still be working very close to this. So from Holland, I was born in the south of Holland, a tiny town near Belgium, and moved to Amsterdam when I was very young, where I started going to the University of Amsterdam and did many courses in philosophy and also art history, which of course in Amsterdam with the Rijksmuseum, Rembrandt, and is a very, very good environment to learn a lot about art. Even if you are not an artist, you learn how to read art and how to understand what stories are paintings telling, what are they trying to communicate, and all the symbolism of it. So it's something I always loved. I did my graduate studies in San Francisco, then to take this to more of an academic level and combine philosophy, art history, into looking at art as tools of communication as well. And then again, long story short, I moved to Montreal. Started working in game production as a production manager, and there I had the choice between managing an engineering team and an art team, and for me that was pretty simple. I wanted to go work with the art team, and I managed a team of character modelers and environment modelers, and that's where I learned how the production, what we call a production pipeline, so it's the process from one step to the other, goes in the production of a video game in terms of art. So you go from like concept artists who then have to go through 3D modeling, have to go to rigging, which is like creating the bones in a character and all the constraints that come with it. Then go into implementing this in the game, behaviors, animation, things like that. So it was incredibly fascinating for me to learn about that and to understand also how important concept art is. Like concept art like these are not just created to be pretty pictures for people to be inspired by in the production team. They're really, really instructive at times. And when I transferred from one company to Ubisoft, I met Jean Guedon. You might have heard his name before. He's the creative director of Black Flag and somebody who's been with the brand forever. And he and I started talking. He liked my background. It's just very detail-oriented and analytical. And he said, well, we have all this amazing art in Assassin's Creed, thousands and thousands of pieces, but nobody knows where they are or what to do with them. And I need you to organize it. I'm like, okay, great. Because that was in 2011. So this already meant like going back 4 years of art history within this brand. And soon I had files of like 7,000 pieces of level design documents, artworks, concept arts, and then trying to filter out who were these artists that did them? Because the files were often named like AC1CHVO22. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with that, right? So that was a whole process to figure that out. And then I met Rafael during that process and asked him if we could implement a naming convention. This sounds very simple, but I'm advising every artist in the audience to use naming conventions because it's huge and very important. So we started naming conventions so we could identify immediately what is the project, what is the subject, when was it made up by whom. So from there on, that took about a year to get that done. Because a lot of artists, they were like, what naming conventions? Why naming conventions? I just want to make art. I'm like, yeah, okay, but there's so much stuff we can do with it. So once that was done, that organization, then we started seeing it more as an organized catalog and realized that, okay, there is this huge potential for art books, huge potential for other books. Like, I don't know how many of you have heard of the Abstergo manual, if anybody has read that. All of that wouldn't be possible without that work of cataloging and finding art and art information. So,
and Anouk has something really interesting to share about that. She brushed a little bit about the art book, but we have something really interesting for you guys. So, and you'll get a chance to see that kind of art book that she's talking about. And the funny thing that you mentioned that, because the first time I've joined Ubisoft, as I am walking along the halls, and I pass by trash cans and I see all these amazing artworks just like dumped there, and I'm like, wait, hold on, why are you just throwing these away? Like, somebody has to do something about these things. And I'm grateful, we're all grateful, at least I think in the community team, that Anouk is there to spearhead a project like that, to share these amazing artworks that you might not have seen inside the game, but get a chance to see it somehow in another medium. But more about that later. Now, I'm sure you guys want to know about like how concept art is being created, how it's applied, or how it evolves in the creation and in development of game. That's why we have Raf here, because he has brought with him not only the knowledge, but some materials to share with you on the evolution of the artwork of Black Flag. So take it away, Raf.
Yeah, we have the slideshow just behind us, but it's showing the big challenge we had in Black Flag, because it was not anymore just a city, just on the architecture. It was also about creating a fully open ocean, dynamic ocean that is reacting dynamically to the weather. We don't have like a scripted event for the storm. For instance, we don't have like a scripted event to have like a calm water. We had this system that is completely organic and reacting randomly as you're sailing in the ocean. So first of all, when we start the conception, we are maybe a couple of, I would say maybe 15 people working in the team. We're a very small team, and we're trying to figure out what will be the context of the game, what will be the universe, what would the character look like. It's it's very creative, very exciting. We have a lot of freedom also. We don't have like all the weight of the game design coming. So it's really about creating like a visual universe and really try to focus on immersion, how to create a very exciting world when you want to explore.
Sorry, this is just a question for me
Yeah.
who is not an
Yeah.
artist, but I'm very curious to know though.
Yeah.
When you create all these artworks, what are the tools that you guys use? Do you use like painting? Do you use watercolor? Do you use
Yeah. So
any
the tool-
program, software, whatever? like
Very simple tools. Recently with Martin, we like to draw on paper just with a pen, actually.
wow.
That's very simple.
Can we see some of those in your book, Anouk?
They started this very recently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we can also use very simple sketches in Photoshop. We draw black and white sketches to first like figure out the composition we want to use later in the final illustration, because it's not interesting to focus on details. I think the details are really something, and this is the problem I see when I do portfolio reviews. Most of the time I see very well polished images with very huge amounts of details, but I don't feel, a real style or a strong image composition. And I think we really have to focus first on the strong shapes, on the graphic shapes of the image, and really make sure that we have a very iconic image as a sketch before going into the rendering, the details, and the atmosphere. So that's a good example of Martin's drawing for the ships coming to a naval battle. And as you see, it's very graphic. It's also very symmetrical. It's simple. It works very well. So when Martin is coming after, to add the details of the small waves and also all the ropes, he already has something that is interesting as very simple shape. And if you just look at the image, like even in black and white, it's already strong and already interesting. So we really have to focus on this kind of stuff.
And so when it comes to creating these concepts, so you say you're using pen and pencil,
Yeah.
whatever, like anything that you can
Whatever
grab
you
hold
like.
onto, right? So where do you get your inspiration from? I know that it starts with like that you're gonna work on Black Flag. It's a project about pirates and
Yeah.
sailing the
we
seas and all that. So
We have a very rough story. We have some bios for the characters, so we already have an inspiration. I think you can't start on something if you don't have any context. So you need a very simple context to start on, but you don't want to have like too many constraints when you start on a conception. As an art director, if you have like already too much constraints, it's very frustrating because we'll get a lot of constraint later on. We'll get to deal with level design, the game design. Also, Assassin's Creed is very historical, so it's very challenging because we have like a very strong reference sometimes on the buildings and how the city looked like. But we were very lucky on Black Flag because we almost don't have anything left from Kingston. There's nothing left from Nassau, from the original city of Nassau. So we had a lot of freedom for interpretation. So it was very, very creative for the artistic team. And it was a very different challenge from, I think the guys working on AC2 recreating Florence, Firenze, was a very different kind of challenge because they have the city is still there. So you can go there, you can see the buildings, even Paris. When you go to, Unity, the game Unity, you go to Paris, you see everything. It's there. So you have this huge weight of history you have to deal with. In Black Flag, it was a lot of freedom. So that was very, very cool. And also we pushed to the next level the stylization, I would say, for the characters and also for the environment.
So you worked on the creation of the characters as well.
Yeah. So we had the scriptwriter working on the bios, and then we take the bios and we talk with him and we find some reference. We use reference from like historical painters. Like Howard Pyle, he's a very famous American painter that was very inspiring for the characters. For the marine painting, for the boats, we took inspiration from Montague Dawson, who is I think he's still painting. He's an American painter also, doing like beautiful sceneries of ocean and boats. This is also from Martin. That was a location that is not finally in the game. That's bad, but it's still a very interesting inspiration for the use of contrast. Have a very strong silhouette in the foreground, in the shade, and then you see the light locally lighting the landmarks of the city. So it's a lot of exploration. And when we design the illustrations and also when we deal with the level designers, we really want to make sure that the player will have a lot of surprise in the environment. So we try to create a lot of diversity in the design of the environments, from architecture to dense forest, to open ocean, to a small cove. So you always want to discover something new, and you have a very different feeling from place to place. So that's very important.
That's really interesting to know. And one of the things that I would like to know, and I think a lot of people here would like to know, would be if you can walk us a little bit through how these concepts are translated towards the game. Like, it doesn't have to be super detailed, but if you can share with us, like, for example, if I am an artist and I approach you and I show you this picture of a costume that I like, like, what happens next? Where does it go, and how does it get into the game?
Yeah, first I think we want to focus on the high level idea of the character. So what kind of personality you want to show, what kind of attitude, what kind of colors he's using, what kind of silhouette can we see, even if he's in the shade, in a dark lighting, we won't still be able to recognize the character. So first it's a very high level concept art, and then we go more into details and we do the front view, the back view, still in 2D, just painting. And we also focus on details. We'll do just an illustration for the hidden blade, for instance, to make sure after the modeler doing like all the characters in 3D, we'll be able to recreate that in the 3D software. So it's a first very, very simple sketch. Like when you start, you don't start with the details. You start with a high-level painting, and then you go more into the low-level details.
Right. So that means if you guys have any amazing idea about a concept or whatever, just like grab a pen and paper and that's it. It won't work for me, but I'm sure for a lot of you it would.
But it's very important, a lot of when I do some portfolio reviews, I can see that some artists will just, start with the eyes, details around the nose, and then they're going like more like the detail of the silhouette, but it's not important. You really more need to focus on the black and white silhouette, just pure intentional high level design, and then after I go into the details.
Thank you so much, Raf.
Yeah,
Those
no
are
problem.
really, really insightful.
Some tips.
Yeah, and then it's good to know. Like, I personally am learning right now. But with that, also with all those tips that you shared, they have been applied to a lot of the artworks that have been produced for Assassin's Creed. And going back to what Anouk has shared earlier, she has compiled a lot of concept art in like one book and worked for it for the longest time. And I myself can't wait to see it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm pretty excited. I'll bug you about that.
Oh, we see the cover just behind.
It's being finalized.
There we go.
Right now, we still have about. I think I still have 2 weeks to let it go. I've had a hard time letting it go.
And I really like this cover because we worked with Jeffrey Simpson on that one. And Jeffrey Simpson is a huge talented concept artist, doing mainly like character design. And we wanted to have this kind of mysterious figure of an assassin, a very heroic face of an assassin, but he's not exactly someone. He's not Altair. He's not Ezio. He's a mix of all the assassins.
Yeah. Oh, you're right.
Yeah. Cool cosplay.
No, because I see it. It's like it
was
just
very
amazing.
deliberate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very deliberate love baby between Altair and Ezio.
Can you tell us about it? Like, what do we expect to see in it? Things that you don't want to spoil, though, but
So like I said, it was a huge process because the book title says it's a visual history of Assassin's Creed, which means that we wanted to tell a story in words, but at the same time, it's the visuals that have to tell the story. So we had to find a good balance between picking the right visuals and telling which story to tell, because there's so much. There's so much history. There's so many visuals, and I think one of the most enjoyable things is for instance to look at the very first concept for Assassin's Creed 1, the very first assassin when it wasn't really an assassin but still a bodyguard.
Will we see that here?
Yes.
Like the first ideas, at least the first batch of drawings.
Yeah, they're in there.
Pretty amazing.
Some environmental scenes that were being explored, because at the time it was, and this is talked about in the book, so it's not a secret. It was still the next Prince of Persia, because Assassin's Creed 1 was the next Prince of Persia and then became its own. became its own game, and you see that very clearly in the earliest concept art. The first assassin looks very much like a prince.
Yeah,
So it's super
I
cool.
don't think a lot of people know about that. I recently knew about that, to be honest. But that's an interesting point. Like, it's good to see how that came about from the idea of Prince of Persia to becoming Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, and it's something indeed that will describe as well in the book, that process with quotes and from Raphael and stories from different artists. Like one of the first concept artists who worked on the game, who said indeed like that through it was Kai is his name. He doesn't work on Assassin's Creed currently, but he was there with the first ones, and how he started creating this prince-like figure and started moving more and more towards a new individual, and it became clear that it was its own existing game, which is such a super cool thing to see visualized.
We actually tried to have this book here, at least show people what's in it, how it looks like, but we don't have it. But in the meantime, can you tell us when it's going to be available for everybody so that they can have a copy if they want to?
We're looking at October right now. So because, like I said, I still have 2 weeks left of people telling me I can't change anything anymore.
No pressure. No pressure.
I've been working very, very closely with Raphael, but also our graphic designer and individual artists to try to make the right choices on what we want to show at what point and how to tell this story in a chronological way, but also, what is the best stuff to show, what's the most important stuff to show. So so it's almost done. Then we go to print, and I'm super, super happy with this.
Can I have
book.
a copy?
For free.
I'll give you a discount.
It never is easy with a Nook. Anyway, so how do you guys work together? I mean, can you tell us, like, your team and your team? I know you guys always work together. So how does this tandem happen?
I would just say that sometimes we need like some specific pieces of art for the books, and for in that case we did like really specifically for that project we did something. But Anouk, you can explain also how.
It's the way we work. It has changed. Like it started off with a few years ago with me asking Raphael for naming conventions and to try to, ask his artists to think of their concepts not just as concept for the game, but also for the brand as a whole. And these days we just go back and forth all the time. Whether it is indeed, when I came to Raphael, I said I would love to have an exclusive cover for this brand art book, and he said, okay, let's talk to Jeff Simpson and let's talk to Alex de la Meurtrie, the graphic designer, and make something happen. Or whether it is like to ask Raphael like for advice on which artworks should be included at what stage, what is the story behind it. I work with his, with the individual artists of Raf's team to ask them like, what's your background behind a specific artwork. So sometimes it can be quite surprising because sometimes the best artworks are like, well, I just wanted to have a cool environment piece, and sometimes a really simple thing can have a very complex explanation. So, it's just a matter of communication, a constant dialogue, going back and forth. There are other projects going on. Indeed, it has already been announced that we're starting a new comic series for Assassin's Creed. So me and Raphael are working closely on that to go through the first sketch drawings, the first covers, and things like that. So that's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, it's also good to know that the people who actually work in the game, like the art of the game, is involved in other media. In Assassin's Creed, so this is how big the universe is and how far we extend beyond the games for Assassin's Creed. So at this point, I also like to grab the opportunity to ask you guys if you have any advice for the artists who are here, or if those who are aspiring or those who are just interested to know how to be successful, or at least go far a little in this industry, what would that be?
I can start.
You can start.
Yeah, I think like it's like in every kind of art and every kind of sport. I think it's focusing on what you like to do. If you're really good at characters, not very good at environments, sometimes it's better to focus more on what you like to do and what you're good at. don't try to do everything. I think it's really more about focusing on what you know you like and what you're good at. Also, what I said before is it's very important to spend time on ideas and high-level ideas and less on details on rendering. Because it's not important. I can really have like a blast on a portfolio that is very simple, very high level, with very simple sketches, and be a bit like less interested in a portfolio that has like a lot of very highly detailed matte painting, for instance, because details is something you can learn and you can really work on later, but having like good ideas and making like beautiful image composition is something more difficult. So that's just what I would say.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Before we move on to Anouk, can I just ask you, how does it feel to see some of the concepts that you've made come to life in the form of the cosplayers and those who walk around the halls right now?
it's very exciting and very funny also sometimes, because you see some interpretation. It's crazy to see how many hours people can spend on cosplay. I've seen she's not there, but Ali McLean did a version of Edward Kenway that is fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, just so you know, guys, your artwork, your cosplay, everything that you put on the net, as much as possible, we see them, and the devs see them, and they appreciate them, and there's just so many of you to thank personally, but yeah, they do, and they, as you can see, makes them happy. And Anouk, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, from a different perspective, of course, because as I said, I'm not an artist. First advice would be, if your parents tell you can't go to art academy, ignore them. No, but by all means, I think that's kind of a joke. But I think talking to all the concept artists a lot from Assassin's Creed, something that they all have in common is that they never stop. They draw, they paint, whether it's digitally or traditionally, day and night. They do it at work for maybe 9 hours a day. They come home, they have dinner, and they do their own personal projects. And I think that's something that pretty much all of them have in common. And it's interesting because, for instance, one of the artists whose artwork you'll see a lot as well in the book is Gilles Bellet, who has a very interesting, very specific style in his Assassin's paintings, but then at home he picks up a very different style, like more impressionist or things like that, or more he goes to museums and let himself be inspired by a new style and tries something new. So I think that even when artists are very, very experienced, I see them never stop experimenting, and they never stop, period. This is what they do day and night, and they do distinguish indeed the work that they do for a specific project, such as Assassin's Creed, because of course then you have a specific mandate or instruction, which I think is super interesting for an artist to find creativity within those boundaries. And then at home they have freedom to experiment, and I think that's kind of what like I'm just astounded by how these artists work like that. At the same time, the last thing is indeed like going into what Raphael said. I think the strongest artists are the ones that have their own very distinct style. We have, and you'll see that also in the book, you'll see a wide range of styles. Martin has his own style. Jeff Simpson has his own style, and Jeff Simpson is very focused on characters. Martin very much on environments. This is what they're good at. And you can recognize like whether the characters are done by Jeff or by somebody else. You see the styles and the style differences, and that's fine even within a brand that has a very established art direction. A wide range of styles is still very much welcome.
And you have a very good point. It's like working. When if you have a very strong talent, it doesn't mean that you can be lazy. You have to work all the time. And also going back to the basic, because a lot of people are getting inspired by what is done right now, and they look just in the internet at contemporary artists and CG artists. And I think it's really important to look back also and look at what the masters did before us, because we learn a lot from the masters, and going back to the basics is really something we can learn from.
Yeah, I think indeed, like we have some nice museums here in Montreal, and I know that there are a few artists like Gilles. Recently, there was an exhibition on Orientalism, and a few of our artists went to that there. Because it was a big inspiration, that style, for Assassin's Creed, as you told me, and that will be discussed even in the art book. There are artists that are going to the current Rodin exhibition to look at sculpture, to look at animation, the way it was done by Rodin. So I think indeed it's inspiration can come from anywhere, and the best artists they never stop getting inspired or being inspired by each other.
Thank you both, and the payoff is always worth it. It's always there's always a great reward for passion. So artists, keep on doing what you're doing and heed their advice because they're pros. So we'd like to open this time for Q&As for you guys. So if you have any questions for Raf or Anouk, there's the mic over there. You may line up, and then we'll try to entertain as many as we can with the remaining time that we have. So yes, please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Gulpri.
Hi. I'm really interested in the costumes of Assassin's Creed. Absolutely love them. How do they come about? Do you work with the writers to come up with something, or do they come to you and say, "Can you create a costume for this character?" How does it work?
You mean for the character design?
Yeah, for the character design.
We really have to work with the story and with the scriptwriter. It's very important to get an inspiration. We can't start from nothing. The story of the character will tell a lot about his his look, the color of his outfit. And for instance, for Calico Jack, we knew that he was wearing like a very exotic cloth, and also he was this kind of fancy character, also very bad, have very bad temper. So we played with the contrast of a very bad guy wearing like very elegant cloth and very exotic style. So yeah, the bio is very important to digest, to learn how to design the character for the artist.
Okay, thank you.
I think, sorry, quickly to add, I think for a cosplayer, what's interesting indeed is, for instance, Calico Jack, is that he used to collect what he would find.
Yeah, a lot of trophies.
So, a lot of trophies, yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that indeed that you find in the lore and in the background. So I think for a cosplayer, it's interesting not to just look like concept art or the final look of the character, but actually read the bios, maybe even, go on Twitter, Facebook, ask about it. Like, why is this person looking like that? Because it's very interesting. There's always a reason why they look the way they do.
Thank you very much, Kulpreet. Yes.
Thanks.
Hi, I'd like to know, where do you get your people that work with you? I mean, do they come from schools? Do they went to university? Or do you just come up to them and be like, oh yeah, I saw something on the internet that you did and will be interested to work with you? How does it work?
That's a very good question. What kind of... we do a casting for the team? I'm kidding.
It's not The Bachelor.
So some very talented artists. I think we kind of want to work together. I think we have this opportunity of working on a very interesting franchise. So a lot of very talented artists already at Ubisoft are working there, and we can bring them into the team. Sometimes we can bring people from the school, but I would say it's for illustrators. It's very difficult to start right away after school. I think it's important to learn also from the game production and maybe start as a modeler and maybe level artist, and then after you can work as an illustrator. But it's pretty rare to have somebody coming right away from the school and starting as an illustrator in conception in the game.
Yeah, I see a lot of people like Gilles, they come from the cinematics as well.
Yeah, from the cinematic, from the movies, from many industries. Now we have a very strong bridge between the film industry and the video game industry. We can get a lot of senior people from the film industry, working on matte painting, character design. We really have the same kind of constraints now. Technically we can really push to the next level the visual. So it's.
I think what's interesting is when you're an artist also to try to learn at least the basics of different disciplines, because indeed, like what I see with a lot of our artists is that even the illustrators often have basic knowledge of 3D modeling or even level design, and it makes them so much better because it makes them understand, for instance, for level design, like a composition of buildings, things like that. Like how is it structured? How is this useful for a production team? And the same thing with 3D modeling and animation. Like some illustrators know the basics of animation, so they understand how anatomy can look beautiful. Correct anatomy can be beautiful in illustrations, but how do you use the anatomy in a way that's useful for the gameplay for a character?
But also, I think it's from what we see in portfolios on the internet, on virtual galleries, and I think Jeffrey, who is here now, is going to be man signing the beautiful poster.
They're here.
Jeffrey, I think we saw your stuff on the internet, and then we really wanted to bring you at Ubisoft. It's depending of many different.
Lastly, outside of the games, like for instance, for me, I often work with freelance or contracting artists. For instance, again, the Abstergo book that came out last year contained illustrations from Andy Bélanger. He's a comic book artist because we really wanted to have illustrations that were portraying the assassins as the bad guys, because these were the illustrations that were supposedly done by the Templars, by Abstergo. So we thought he was a great fit, and the way we found him is that he's part of this collective of artists that's right around the corner of Ubisoft. He's actually has an artist booth downstairs. I really recommend checking him out because he also has his own comic book series. So that's kind of how we find people. Everybody knows each other.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. I am so sorry, but we will only accept one more question. But don't worry, because Raf, Jeff, and Martin, they're going to be at our booth later. So you can feel free to approach them. We have free prints to give away, and they can sign it for you, and you can have a chat with them. So please, sorry, go ahead with your
Hi.
question.
My question is, how hard is it to come up with a final product? There's so many different choices in art. You come up with a new thing maybe every second, like, oh, we could add more colors or leather or belts or more.
That's a very good question. So we need to set up a frame. The frame could be the story, the style we want to have. Also, we have our own style. I think I would have a style in art direction, and my illustrator, they have also a style. So we try to get the best from the artists, from the team, and we get also challenged by the producers and the creative directors. So we always try to find the best in between solution. And the idea is to do the best thing, So having a frame that is like what kind of story we want to have, what kind of style we want to apply on all the game, is helping us to validate and to make approvals on the artworks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for attending our panel. We'll still be around at 4 o'clock. We'll have a cosplay contest, and we're giving away raffles. It's the last day of Comic-Con, so make sure to drop by our booth, and we'd love to talk to you more. And Jeff, like what I said, Jeff and Raf and Martin are going to be there to answer some of your questions and sign some free prints from us. So thank you again, and see you around.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.